Lawfare victim number 1, Sheriff Robert Arnold. Mr. Arnold, please read the first few lines of the complaint against you. The United States versus Robert Arnold. Jack Smith then explained that they had unlimited resources and would not stop until he was convicted of a crime and put in jail. When asked what Sheriff Robert Arnold was convicted of in 2017, most locals respond by saying something like, he illegally sold e-cigarettes to inmates, or he got greedy and stole money from the sheriff's office, or he lied to prosecutors. None of those responses are true. Robert Arnold was convicted by the federal government, not the state of Tennessee, of wire fraud, violating the Hobbs Act and the Honest Services Act. Those sound really terrible. There wasn't and still isn't a Tennessee law or regulation against a sheriff, sheriff's deputy, or sheriff's office employee selling a product or service to an inmate's family or friend. Not to an inmate, but an inmate's family or friend. That's what Sheriff Robert Arnold's personal company, Jail Cigs, did. They sold e-cigarettes to the family and friends of inmates, who then sent those e-cigarettes to inmates through the mail. By the way, did you know the average American citizen commits 3 federal crimes every day without knowing it? That's right. There are tens of thousands of federal laws, and we break them often. The feds are able to prosecute with limitless funds and resources. They have a 97% conviction rate, mostly because they can outlast the average citizen by outspending them, bankrupting them, embarrassing them, completely disrupting their lives. The defendants often lose their jobs, have to shut down their businesses, and even have their families destroyed because of the accusations and litigation. The leader of Stalin's KGB infamously said, "Show me the man and I'll find you the crime." We have modern-day examples of this very thing happening right before our very eyes. 3-star General Michael Flynn appears to have been set up by corrupt politicians and federal agents in a perjury trap. When they threatened to prosecute his son, he pled guilty in order to spare his kid. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, although it's not likely that a criminal will carefully consider the text of the law before he murders or steals, it is reasonable that a fair warning should be given to the world in a language that the common world will understand, of what the law intends to do if a certain line is passed. Please meet Robert Arnold. He used to be the sheriff of Rutherford County, Tennessee, until he was unjustly prosecuted by Obama's DOJ and put in federal prison. His conviction happened 2 days before the presidential inauguration of Donald Trump in 2017. Arnold is not a political leader. He was simply a sheriff's deputy that had the gall and the guts to challenge and defeat a longtime Democrat sheriff. From the day he filed paperwork to run for office, he seemed to have a target on his back by both hardcore Democrats and their establishment Republican allies. Arnold ran as a Republican because he is a conservative, but he never dreamed at how corrupt the Democrat-Republican establishment is in Tennessee. In 2010, Arnold defeated the incumbent Democrat, then won re-election after his first term. He dramatically reformed the sheriff's office, and a lot of locals didn't like it, especially those inside the sheriff's office. Every day during Arnold's federal trial, the prosecutor, Mark J. Cipoletti, appointed by Jack Smith, yes, the same Jack Smith that prosecuted President Trump, would fly into Nashville from D.C. just for Arnold's case. A sheriff from Rutherford County, Robert was never indicted or prosecuted locally. This went to the Obama DOJ and bypassed local and state authorities because they could not find any illegal actions that Robert had committed. He pled guilty after being put into solitary confinement until the pressure became too much, and he saw this as a way to get back to his family quickly. He believes that was a huge mistake on his part, and now he wants to clear his name.
It could take about 8 years to go up to the Court of Appeals to get the relief and all that. So you're thinking, okay, I can beat this, But I could be in there for 8 to 10 years, and then I could possibly beat the rest of this, but still be stuck as a convicted felon. Or I can take the 57 to 71 months, pray that the judge goes at the 57 instead of the 71, and get home and get this put past you as fast as possible. So you're thinking, possibly I could go in, and by the time I get home, I could be having a beer with my son. I could miss out on his entire childhood. And that's what made it so difficult to do, because of I wanted to fight. And as an SRO, I used to tell the kids, they would get in trouble. If you didn't do anything wrong, fight it to the hill. But if you did something wrong, just admit it and go on, you know. And I wanted to fight. I was like, listen, I'm not guilty of this stuff. But yet I had to think about my family. And I'd never kind of been put in that situation to where, you know, I have to focus on Ava and Evan more than I ever have. And so here it was thinking about it, and I'm like, I gotta get home. You know, I gotta get home to my kids. So I decided to take the plea deal. I wish I would have fought it, but I'm glad I came home.
The effort to oust Sheriff Robert Arnold from office is believed to have started with a bitter sheriff's employee, Deputy Chief Virgil Gammon, who resented that Arnold won the office because of his own desire to be the sheriff. Gammon had served under the 30-year incumbent Sheriff Truman Jones, and many have said he was promised the job after Jones retired. In a surprise move, Jones ran for re-election instead of retiring in 2010. Many believed that this was devastating to Gammon's, but he was a loyal soldier. He nor Jones anticipated that a humble deputy would win the office of sheriff. Arnold faithfully served as sheriff for 6 years, until Arnold learned from former state representative Rick Womack, former Air Force F-15 fighter pilot, Gulf War veteran, and now commercial airline pilot, that while on the floor of the state's House of Representatives, he was told by Governor Haslam's staff that the Rutherford County Mayor, Ernest Burgess, called Governor Haslam and requested that the state begin a criminal investigation of Arnold's financial disclosures. Governor Haslam then reached out to the director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, Mark Gwynn, a longtime friend of Chief Deputy Gammon, to begin the investigation, an investigation that ultimately exonerated Arnold and proved that he had not broken any state or ethics laws. Additionally, Governor Haslam during this time frame also contacted the Washington, D.C. DOJ in an effort to have Arnold's e-cigarette company investigated. It's important to note here that Rutherford County Mayor Burgess was a huge financial contributor and supporter of Governor Haslam and his campaigns. Both the TBI and the DOJ launched the investigation against Sheriff Arnold in 2015. Once you have the feds on your case, it's virtually impossible to win. Many believe had the investigation been going on during President Trump's administration, it would have been dismissed by the Justice Department. So the Obama administration fast-tracked the prosecution and put the pressure on to get a conviction before Trump's inauguration.
I believe there was a Republican and a Democrat and an independent movement to get Robert Arnold out of office. He was challenging the status quo, I believe, and he was threatening people that had entrenched positions and had figured out how to profit off the system. He challenged that, and that's, in the swamp, that's a dangerous thing. You threaten them, you threaten their livelihood, and they will rise up. And I believe, by and large, that is what was Robert's problem. He challenged the swamp.
Arnold grew up in rural Middle Tennessee in a small community called Walter Hill. He struggled in school due to severe dyslexia, but was able to get his high school diploma and go on to a wonderful career in law enforcement. From jailer to patrol to being a student resource officer, and then eventually serving his fellow citizens as their sheriff. In 2010, his victory over a longtime Democrat incumbent shocked locals and the entire law enforcement community throughout the state.
Who was the only candidate for sheriff endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police? Sheriff Robert Arnold. Who was the only candidate for sheriff to reduce our crime rate by 20%? Sheriff Robert Arnold. Who was the only candidate for sheriff to save taxpayers millions while placing an SRO or deputy in every county school? Conservative, innovative, and energetic. Vote for common sense innovation. Vote for Sheriff Robert Arnold.
Arnold believes this is when several people in the political and law enforcement community began their plans to get him out of office by any means necessary. Why did he go to prison for over 35 months, 7 of those months in solitary confinement? What was his crime? The feds said wire fraud, the Hobbs Act, and the Honest Services Act. They also said it was being a one-third partner in a company that sold clear plastic e-cigarettes to the friends and families of jail inmates. Arnold's contention is that in order for that to be illegal, it must be clearly defined by law.
I just want this convicted felon cloak of stinkiness off of me. I want to move on with my life. I know I didn't do wrong. I know you could say it was maybe unethical in some ways, but it was not illegal what I did. Was it a mistake? Should I have done it? No. Looking back on it, with everything that it caused, no, it was not worth it, this or that. I was just trying to, provide something to help out in the jail. And then I was also preparing myself. If I wasn't reelected, I would have something to fall back on and to go into immediately. I still had to provide at the time for a very young family.
Robert Arnold enforced the law for decades. When he arrested someone, it was because they had allegedly broken the law and their fate would be determined in the court and by the rule of law. What happened to him, many believe, was, as Justice Clarence Thomas said, while defending himself against a massive political onslaught, a high-tech lynching. A mob of political and law enforcement power brokers got what they wanted. Sheriff Robert Arnold gone. Now, he's telling his side of the story. There are 3 primary points to make. Number 1, selling plastic-covered e-cigarettes to the friends and family of county inmates is not illegal. We repeat, this was not illegal and it still isn't illegal. Item number 2, establishment politicians and law enforcement officers wanted Arnold out of the sheriff's office, period. Item number 3, the punishment he received far exceeded the perceived wrongdoing. Number 1, can 2 goods make a wrong? This part of the story starts in 2012 when the Rutherford County Circuit Court Clerk Laura Bowling decided to confiscate inmate commissary accounts for overdue court fees. Needless to say, when one of the county's inmates wanted to buy a snack or personal item from the commissary and discovered there wasn't any money in their account, they were quite upset. They were never warned or given the opportunity to make payment arrangement by the circuit court clerk's office. The primary duty of the sheriff's office is to house inmates waiting trial, and now they had to deal with the very angry aftermath of commissary funds being confiscated by the circuit court clerk's office. One of the sheriff's office officials, Virgil Gammon, took it upon himself to contact a jail commissary company, Keefe Commissary, to provide inmates the ability to have products purchased for them through an account and delivered to them outside of county accounts. Keefe Commissary created a new entity called Access Secure Pack to do exactly this. This prevented another fiasco like they had when the county clerk confiscated inmate funds. Later, while at a law enforcement convention in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2013, Sheriff Arnold learned about clear plastic e-cigarettes made by the Crossbar Company. Founded by an elected Kentucky jailer, the equivalent of a Tennessee county sheriff. He immediately thought this was the perfect solution for jail inmates because the typical e-cigarette was metal, and metal is not allowed in jails for obvious reasons. He and his staff, including Deputy Virgil Gammons, met with the Crossbar Company approximately 1 month later. Crossbar wanted the sheriff's office to purchase the e-cigarettes in bulk and use county money for the transaction. Since county money could not be used, and since Keefe Commissary did not stock e-cigarettes as part of their products list, the sheriff's office chose to pursue an alternative method for the purchase, a method that was legal according to Tennessee Code annotated and ethics laws. Sheriff Arnold, Joe Russell, his department chief of staff, and Arnold's uncle, John Vanderveer, created a company called Jail Cigs, since they knew other county jails faced the same problem and would be interested in participating. They set up the company in such a way that other county jails would receive a portion of the sales proceeds, allowing them to aid local county sheriffs' operating budgets. Each sheriff's office receives $5 for every e-cigarette sold to an inmate in their county jail.
The whole time I was, like, when they put me on suicide watch, the inmates were paid to watch me. Do you know what they were paid with? They were paid with crossbar e-cigarettes. It's what the jail paid them in. And that was the other thing is Crossbar e-cigarettes was the company that we originally worked with to get them into our facility, and that's where Jail Cigs bought their e-cigarettes from, was from Crossbar.
Arnold wanted to keep his presence in the company as minimal as possible, not just for appearances, but because he literally did not have the time to participate in the day-to-day running of Jail Cigs. Arnold was never listed on the company's legal documents because he was simply an outside investor. He received a 1099 as an independent contractor, and he paid personal taxes on all revenue he received from the company as an investor. He later discovered that not being listed as an investor on the company's legal documents needed to be changed. Once he was informed of this error, the company began the correction process. This was an important correction that needed to be made, since Sheriff Arnold is required to report all earnings in the Tennessee Disclosure Report, a report which is required by law to be completed when filing for election to a public office. This is a vital point. Arnold's honesty is what triggered his eventual prosecution and incarceration. There is no law preventing a sheriff from owning or operating a company outside of their regular job. Many asked Sheriff Arnold, "Why weren't you content with your salary as sheriff?" His reply was always, "There's no security in my job. I have to get reelected every 4 years, and my primary job was to provide for my family for the rest of my life." I always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and helping to form a company about something I know a lot about with people I trusted totally made sense to me. So he did. But they were selling their products in 22 counties outside of Rutherford County and hired a couple of salespeople to represent them. 11 other Tennessee sheriffs allowed Jail Cigs to be sold to families and friends, and yet they were never prosecuted. They were selling to the inmates' friends and families, and the sheriffs allowed Jail Cigs to be mailed to the jail, and the officers passed them out to the inmates just like Rutherford County. If it was wrong for Sheriff Arnold and Jail Cigs, why were these other sheriffs also not prosecuted? Things were going quite well with Jail Cigs. They spent several months researching if there was a conflict of interest through either the law or regulation. There wasn't. They even asked the county attorney and posed it as a possible scenario, and he stated it needed to be sent out to bid, but there was nothing to bid out. This was not going through the county purchasing process, and they didn't want the county clerk to confiscate inmate funds again, similar to Access Secure Pack. They wanted to keep the process simple and separate. Jail Cigs never sold anything to Rutherford County, and no taxpayer monies were ever involved. They only sold e-cigarettes to the friends and family of inmates, and the product was then mailed to the inmates by their family or friends. No government agency was ever involved outside of their deputies delivering the mail to inmates as they normally did. From asking the county attorney to reading every law and statute related to the issue, it was clear that there wasn't a law or regulation against Jail Cigs selling e-cigarettes in Rutherford County or anywhere else. They were not violating any county's purchasing policy or procedure. Jail Cigs had funds in an escrow account reserved for the sheriff's office as per Joe Russell, Jail Cigs CEO. It is customary for jail vendors to donate funds or products to the sheriff's office. As an example, some of the Rutherford County Sheriff Office vendors had donated tasers to the sheriff's office. Now, here's Robert Arnold's mea culpa. Or as they say in Walter Hill, he's going to be straight up with you. In retrospect, the optics were bad here. As soon as people heard the sound bites on the news of what was going on, they immediately believed Arnold, as sheriff, was taking advantage of his position to enrich himself. He wasn't, but that's what happens in a gotcha culture full of half-truths and political gamesmanship. Please understand that when he formed Jail Cigs, he knew when friends and family were able to purchase Jail Cigs products for their incarcerated friends and families, this would allow the inmates to abide by wide-sweeping rules against smoking in jails and help eliminate the cigarette black market. Do you know that jail inmates have been killed fighting over cigarettes? Anything Sheriff Arnold could do to make the jail more efficient and peaceful for the taxpayers and the lives of inmates more humane, he did. A jail is not a prison. Many inmates in the Rutherford County Jail are mostly awaiting trial, which means they are innocent until proven guilty. They all deserve to be treated fairly and humanely. E-cigarettes, Arnold believed, was just one way to make their time in jail more tolerable. Be careful what you wish for. 2009. That was the year Deputy Arnold decided he wanted to run for sheriff. That's right, he took on a 30-year incumbent sheriff with more ties to the community than you can imagine. Arnold was called every name in the book and told he could never beat Sheriff Truman Jones. He did in 2010, and from that day forward, he had a target on his back. As the new sheriff in town, he cleaned up a filthy jail that had been cited several times for uncleanliness. He reformed almost every process in the sheriff's office, won numerous awards, and was placed on several committees and boards by his peers. Not from political allies, but from his peers. Arnold is still very proud of what he accomplished at the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office in just a few short years. Here are a few of those accomplishments. But that wasn't enough. The establishment was out for blood, and unfortunately, Arnold gave it to them. How? By reporting his income from Jail Cigs. He could have hidden his participation in Jail Cigs, but he didn't. Many think the attacks on him came from the county mayor and from within the sheriff's office. Honestly, no one knows for sure. But when you look at all the facts and connect the dots, you have to believe the attacks mostly came from within the sheriff's office by folks that either wanted to be sheriff or resented never being sheriff. This appears to be a coup d'etat of a sitting constitutionally elected sheriff, the most powerful elected official in the county. Arnold had been indicted and was awaiting trial. He wanted to proceed full steam ahead and be exonerated by a jury of his peers. Ultimately, this situation caused major friction in his marriage, and his wife claimed he roughed her up one night.
He's already facing a federal indictment. Now there are claims he pushed his wife to the ground, punched her, even dragged her with a belt.
Arnold had been free, awaiting trial scheduled for early next year on corruption charges, but a judge revoked his pretrial release in light of recent domestic abuse allegations. Many, including the Rutherford County District Attorney, figured this might just force Arnold off the job.
He has never harmed his wife or any other woman and never would. But given the combustible environment he was in due to the Jail Cigs investigation, this was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. Did his now ex-wife call the police on him? No.
I think it was an argument that got blown out of proportion.
Megan Arnold says it's wrong what happened to her husband, Rutherford County Sheriff Robert Arnold.
I don't think he needs to be incarcerated. The state of our relationship is as any normal couple. I mean, we all have our good days, we have our bad days.
And you think he's being punished for a bad day?
Yeah.
Audio of Megan talking to a friend about the alleged assault and how she feared her husband was played in court, but Arnold was never charged with domestic assault.
Unbeknownst to him, his now ex-wife was having an affair with the former police chief from Eagleville, Tennessee, a nearby city. It's been told that this former police chief, Eli Stewart, was being investigated for incorrectly handling rifles provided to the city of Eagleville by the federal government. Federal law enforcement may have put Eli up to seducing Sheriff Arnold's now ex-wife online. Eli Stewart reached out to her through Messenger, Instagram, and Snapchat. The feds made him record his phone calls and get-togethers with Sheriff Arnold's wife in hopes of getting something on Arnold they could use in their prosecution. In one conversation, she told Eli Stewart that Sheriff Arnold assaulted her. The truth is, they were both stressed and drinking alcohol one evening. Arnold had taken a sleeping pill and wanted to go to sleep, but she was badgering him about something and wouldn't leave his bedroom. He asked her to leave and slowly edged her out of the room. He tried to close the bedroom door and she pinched and twisted his nipples. Now, please know, she was a competitive powerlifter and a kickboxing instructor, so she was very strong and could handle herself. In serious pain and shock, he reacted by pushing her away so that she would release her grip. She fell backwards. He reached over to help her get up. She kicked him in the stomach. He tried again to help her. She refused and cursed at him. They slept in separate beds that night. Later, in the recorded phone call with Stewart, she admits he didn't hurt her and even tried to help her get up. She also admitted that she assaulted Arnold first. That is the exact and whole truth of the incident. The feds heard her version of the story through their surveillance of the former police chief. Shortly thereafter, Arnold was going to the federal courthouse in Nashville for his day in court. The feds scheduled a court hearing based upon what Megan stated on surveillance audio. The hearing was scheduled for September 26, 2016. What was supposed to be a 1-hour hearing turned into 4 hours. The judge sent everyone home and decided to make everyone come back the next day to hear her verdict. Megan had refused to testify during the hearing. The judge revoked Robert's pretrial release, and the U.S. Marshals took Robert into custody and transported him to Grayson County, Kentucky on September 27th. This was the most devastating part of the process because he could no longer prepare for trial, and trial was moved up from June. Now, any conversation he had was recorded by the feds. There were stacks and stacks of paperwork he needed to access that supported his side of the story. But he was in solitary confinement and could not properly prepare to defend himself, and his soon-to-be ex and adulterous wife was not helping him at all. In solitary, Arnold was allowed to watch TV 1 hour a day, usually between 2 and 3 a.m., and his food was often shoved through a slot and slung on the ground. He often ate his food off the cement. He lost 50 pounds in 4 months while in solitary. He was literally going crazy. He had lost his family, his career, his income, and his reputation, and could not see his 2 young children. All of the things that mattered to him the most. All because he wanted to provide inmates the ability to vape in jail and provide for his family. The punishment should fit the crime. At most, Arnold should have received a reprimand or been censured. Remember, there isn't a law against a sheriff owning or participating in a company that sells products to the friends and families of inmates. Period. Even today, that law doesn't exist, but it magically appeared when it came to Sheriff Arnold. Many believe, on referral from Mayor Ernest Burgess or Deputy Virgil Gammon, Rutherford County District Attorney Jennings Jones called the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and that they said there wasn't a crime being committed and couldn't do anything. Then the case was sent to the feds. To this day, it's not publicly known who called them, and this is one of the reasons there needs to be an investigation of the investigation.
Yeah, I don't know who made the decision to call the Justice Department in Washington, but I do know that he was cleared by the TBI and the local, I guess, I would assume by the local district attorney that there was no state laws violated. Then somebody at some point made the decision to call the federal government.
If they can do this to a constitutionally elected sheriff, what can they do to the average citizen? Arnold's legal representation was extremely experienced. They were obviously not very effective. Federal prosecutor Jack Smith said to Arnold, "Mr. Arnold, please read the first few lines of the complaint against you." He did. It said, "The United States versus Robert Arnold." Jack Smith then explained that they had unlimited resources and would not stop until he was convicted of a crime and put in jail. Needless to say, Arnold was devastated, financially exhausted, emotionally spent, and spiritually drained. He submitted to their demands and pled guilty to 3 crimes: wire fraud, the Hobbs Act, and the Honest Services Act, down from 14 accused crimes. His attorneys had previously instructed him to not pay the county the funds and escrow monies because they said it would be used later as a strategy. But by the end of the process, the fans demanded that he say he never intended to give the funds to Rutherford County. That was not true, but they said that was the only way he'd get a plea officer. This is the only time Arnold lied. Joe Russell, Arnold's chief deputy, next-door neighbor, and Jail 6 business partner, was to testify against Arnold. But due to the plea bargain Arnold struck, Russell never testified in court.
We were nowhere prepared for a case whatsoever. And then when we got denied, and the case was going to be in 6 weeks, and we sat down at my attorney's office, and she's just like, I'm going to have to cancel my entire schedule, and we're going to have to do nothing. You're going to have to live up here for the next 6 weeks. I just don't see any way around this. Are you sure there's nothing you can think of that y'all could plead guilty for? She wasn't wanting to help. I was just like, okay, well, I got to think of something. Otherwise, we're going to get railroaded for 20 years. This is not going to work. The only thing I can think of is Robert didn't want to give them a donation at one time, but that's not the way we went. Oh, but he said it out loud? Well, yeah, we're probably sitting around one night drinking a beer. Oh, that's all it takes. And then she called the district attorney and says, hey, let's make a deal. And from that point forward, everything was greased for us to just be railroaded on off. And that's the way that went.
But we do now know that Joe Russell provided the needed information to the feds on Arnold to help himself get off easy. Russell stated that he lied so that he could get a better deal because he knew he was not going to win against the feds. Russell never hired an attorney and instead took on a public defender. He believed he would be bankrupted and still go to jail, so why spend all of his money on an expensive attorney? He may have been correct.
My lawyer came back to me and said, hey, Joe Russell has cut a deal, and he's going to testify against you. And I'm like, what? You know, Joe and I had talked, this and that. We were ready to fight, ready to show how we didn't break the law, this and that. You know, what are you doing? You know, I thought we were standing together moving forward. And Joe has talked to me about it since and explained some of the stuff, and I don't hold any ill will. You know, I get it. He had 2 kids at home too, just like I did. You know, you basically, you figure out you're not going to beat the system, so now what do I have to do to get home to my kids? That's exactly what I thought.
For Arnold, getting out of solitary confinement after 7 months and back to his family sounded like a great deal compared to years in solitary. Arnold repeatedly requested to be put in general population, but the feds refused. Solitary is typically reserved for inmates that are a danger to themselves or to others. Robert Arnold was neither. Even though he was bankrupt, the hope of getting back to some sense of normal in a reasonable amount of time was his last hope. He started his prison time in Kentucky, then to Memphis, Oklahoma City, Atlanta, and then finally to Montgomery, Alabama. 7 months mushroomed into 35 months and 15 days. How was he convicted of wire fraud? Sam Stockard, a Murfreesboro Post reporter, sent Arnold an email, and Arnold forwarded it to Joe Russell and his uncle in Georgia. And this was one of the things they convicted him on: the Hobbs Act, robbery or extortion that affects interstate or foreign commerce. They first said he bribed himself, but then they said he extorted Rutherford County by not paying them money, even though they held unrequired funds as a gift donation in escrow, as they did with every county in Tennessee except for Sumner. Just as Access Secure Pack had done previously for Rutherford County, and similar to how vendors give clients really nice Christmas gifts. He was also convicted of the Honest Services Act, a scheme to defraud another of the intangible right to honest services through a scheme to violate a fiduciary duty by bribery or kickbacks. There wasn't any fraud or intent to deceive. When they searched Arnold and Russell's homes, they said they were looking for the money, the cash. There wasn't any money laying around. It was in a bank account and set aside to give to the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. Wire fraud. A forwarded email from an inquiry from a reporter forwarded to his uncle in Georgia. Hobbs Act. Arnold's uncle lived in Georgia and received money from his efforts with Jail 6. That's what they called interstate commerce. Honest Services Act. They said Arnold never intended to give the funds in the escrow account to the sheriff's office, all based on Joe Russell's testimony. There was never any intent to hide or scheme. Arnold reported his income. It was a legitimate company providing a legitimate product to legitimate customers that wanted or needed it. There was not one dime of state or county money paid to Jail 6. After his conviction, his defense team wished him luck. Russell needed a reduced sentence after the feds threatened to go after his wife, Nicole Russell, because she was the attorney that helped set up Jail 6. Arnold's uncle, John Vanderveer, a minority partner, was convicted of obstruction. Russell and Vanderveer both also served time in federal prison. This prosecution came from the Obama DOJ Main Justice Department. That is directly from D.C., not Tennessee or regional, but the main prosecutor flew in from D.C. to oversee the prosecution.
I believe that Robert Arnold should have a full presidential pardon because they have taken from this man his pension that he worked for years, even before he was elected sheriff. It was wiped out. Their intent was to destroy a human life. That is morally reprehensible, and it is wrong.
Arnold pled on January 18, 2017. He had been involved in law enforcement for decades, and this certainly seemed like overkill for a Tennessee sheriff from Walter Hill that did not break any existing laws or regulations. If you believe Robert Arnold intentionally broke an obscure federal law for whatever reason, then we understand and wish you well. But if you believe there is a chance that Robert Arnold was wrongfully prosecuted and convicted, and that he was Lawfare victim number 1, then he needs your prayers and encouragement. He is not asking anyone for money. He is not crowdfunding or raising money. He just wants to clear his name through a presidential pardon. He will spend the rest of his life and every spare dime he has to see this through. Thank you, and God bless.